the Ramchal school of what we call the secrets of the Torah. The Zohar, Ramchal was one of the greatest Kabbalists since the Arizal. They even said to him, you're revealing secrets that the Arizal didn't even reveal. So are you trying to say that you're greater than the Arizal? And he said, definitely not. But it wasn't time in the time of the Arizal to reveal these secrets, and now it's in my time, it's the time to reveal, and therefore he revealed it. So the Ramchal, I'll tell you a quick overview. He lived 300 years ago in Italy, and he was, like we said, one of the greatest Kabbalists. He wrote over 80 books of Kabbalah. Most of them were burnt. I'll explain why. Like the Rambam's books were burnt, and many other great leaders that are not understood who they are and what they're all about. But the Ramchal, he passed away very young at the age of 38 in Israel, in Akko. He's buried in Tveria. I recommend anyone who can, if you're in Tveria, definitely go there. The Ramchal, as we said, was one of the greatest Kabbalists. And because he was so young, and because he was right after the crisis of Shabtai Tzvi, I hope everyone knows about these ideas, the false Messiah. And you have to understand what a crisis that was in the Jewish world. We're talking about the majority of the rabbis, of the rabbinical authority of the Jewish people, believed that he was the Messiah, Shabtai Tzvi. And when he turned out to be a rapist and an immoral person, he was doing all kinds of, he had this theory that he has to go down to the lowest places to lift up the sparks, and he had to do every possible transgression in the Torah, because he has to go down to the 49 levels of impurity to uplift it, and then it came out who he truly is, and it was a huge disaster. And the rabbis, the rabbinical world, were on like a witch hunt to try to find where are the followers, or where are these charismatic people that will, because he was a Kabbalist, Shabtai Tzvi, Yimach Shemo, or Shem Reshaim Yirkav. And anyway, what happened in the end was the rabbis went to the authorities and they said, that they made up all these things, and they got him imprisoned. In prison, they came to him and they said, if you want to get the Ramchal, they got the rabbis got the Ramchal put in prison. And they said, they came to him with a document. If you sign the document that you will not put out any Kabbalistic writings anymore, Rabbi Yeshua Basan, who was a great, great leader, came to him and said, how can you sign this document? Your whole purpose in life is to bring down the secrets of the Torah. You can't say you will not put out the Kabbalistic writings. So he said, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to be in prison my whole life? But always read the small lines, the small print. I wrote any Kabbalistic writings. And he said, and I'm going to Israel. So he left from Italy to Israel, but he stopped in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, he had a burning desire to write, to bring down whatever teachings that he felt he needed to bring down. And he decided that because the crisis that the Jewish people went through was following a leader who was immoral and corrupt, therefore I will write a book that explains the process and the steps, the stages that the leader, the person that wants to reach the highest spiritual level has to go through. This book, the Messilat Yesharim, is a manual on how to have Ruach HaKodesh. It's a book since the temple was destroyed. When 2,000 years ago, the temple was destroyed, and the rabbis decided to basically get rid of prophecy, or God decided to stop prophecy, and at the same time to diminish the power of idol worshipping. So, in other words, in order to have freedom of choice, there has to be zeh lumat zeh bara Elohim. There has to be a compelling argument on both sides for you to have freedom of choice. If it's so clear that you do the mitzvahs and everything goes smoothly and your life is happy and everything works out perfectly and you become rich and healthy and wealthy and everything you want, so what's the test? What's the challenge? We're living in this world. It's complex and you have difficult choices to make. And there was prophecy, and at the same time there was idol worshiping, and they were both very, very, very powerful. We went down a level, a notch. Now we don't have prophecy and we don't have idol worshiping in its great intensity as it was, but we have now Ruach HaKodesh and Ruach HaTumah. We have the spirit of the Ruach is like wind. Kodesh is, in other words, you're driven from inside to do the will of God. It's not like hearing the word of God. It's a draw. It pulls you towards the word of God. And this book is the program and the system on how you get there and how the leaders got there. Any questions till now? Because you look a little confused. No? Okay. Yes. Okay. So let's get started. So, like we said, the Ramchal said that right now the most important book to come out is this book that explains how the steps and the stages you take, that you should, what it takes to be a person with Ruach HaKodesh. And this book, and then Ramchal kept going to Israel, and when he came here after a short while, he got sick and he passed away at the age of 38. So you could say, now this is important to know, after the Bible, in the Jewish library, the Messilat Yesharim is the #1 bestseller. It's studied in every group, in every yeshiva, Hasidic, Mitnagdi, everybody studies it, everybody believes in it, and it's the masterpiece. So we have the honor of learning this book. And the honor to try to connect to this great man, the Ramchal. And basically, in the last 300 years, there hasn't been any book like this. And the Gaon of Vilna, when he got this book, he paid a humongous sum of money. And he put on his Shabbos clothes to go get it. And when he went to receive the book, he said, if I could, I would walk by foot to sit at the feet of the Ramchal and have him teach me. And he studied the book that day 101 times. This book, the Messilat Yesharim. And for the rest of his life, he studied this book every day. So we're talking about the Gaon of Vilna. Like, we can't even begin to imagine what is this book and what is the Ramchal. But we will take the steps and begin. So some books, when it comes to the introduction, you can skip the introduction. If a rabbi says to you, my house almost burnt down, and I said, God, if you save my life, I will write a book, you don't need to read that introduction. Maybe it's nice, but you don't need that introduction in order to understand the book. The introduction in this book, in the Messilat Yesharim, is like the way he says that this world is a pathway to the next world, to the hall. You can't start chapter 1 in this book. You have to study the introduction. Is crucial to knowing the purposes, the goals, the reason, and the
You want?
La briut. No, thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Number 1. Amar Amchaber. So the author wrote, Amar Amchaber, החיבור הזה לא חיברתיו ללמד אדם את שני לא ידעו. So he says, when you study this book, I don't want you to think that you're studying this book to learn something that you don't know. Why would I study a book that I know? That's the first thing. Number 1, the purpose of this book is not to learn wisdom, it's a workbook. So number 1, take out of your mind this idea that I'm going to be more intellectually stimulated. There are chidushim in this book. Everything is revolutionary. But the way Rav Sarna taught this idea, he was the Rav of Hebron. He taught Rashiv of Hebron. He said, what does that mean? I'm not trying to teach you something that you don't know. And he goes on. not only am I going to teach you, everything I tell you is the mefusam pirsum gadol. Everybody knows it, right? דברים שרוב בני אדם יודעים אותם ולא מסתפקים, and you're not going to think anything is, they're all known, but you forgot. What is he talking about? So Rav Sarna said, it says in Gemara Shabbos, in Nida, I think Daf Nun Aleph, it says that a baby that is born, the baby in the fetus, in the womb, he studies the whole entire Torah from one beginning to the end. And then when you come to the world, the angel ba malach v'satro al piv, it gives you a little tap on your lip. And some people say that's why we have this thing here. And then you forget everything. So what the Ramchal is trying to tell us here is that this book is like any other Torah book. Don't think because you're learning Musar, which is how to be a better person, how to get close to God, how to all these things. Don't think it's not real Torah. If I'm learning Halacha, if I'm learning Gemara, that's real Torah. No, this is like every other Torah. It needs to be studied with seriousness, in depth, and it needs to be studied with chavruta, the way all of the Torah is supposed to be studied with chavrutas. Right? V'dibarta bam, you have to talk. You don't talk to yourself, you talk to other people. And therefore the best way to learn Torah, and also this book, is to learn with chavrutat. And like my rabbi said, Rav Shlomo Aviner, he said everyone needs to have 3 different chavrutas, or study someone who's above you, who you're like you learn from, that he knows more than you, somebody that's equal to you, and somebody that knows less than you. So that way you're learning, and you're lilmod v'lilamed, whatever you're learning, you're also sharing. At the same time, you have people above you, and you have someone equal to you that you learn, and you're able to really discuss it and go over it, try to find an equal chavruta, and that is the way to learn Torah. So that's what he says. So don't, it's very important when you start learning something to set your expectations. You're not here to learn something new and be all excited and wow, I didn't know that. You're here to internalize, to take things from your conscious to your unconscious. How do you make something be part of you? That's what this book is part of. It's not a book where you're going to learn new things and you learned it and great, now move on to something else. No. So you have to repeat all the time. And like I said, my rabbi, he showed me his book, his Messilat Yesharim. He's been learning the same book for like 57 years. He's 75 and he got the book when he was 13 or something. And there he is, and he showed me the book, the same Messilat Yesharim. Every day he wakes up, and that's the book he learns. Unbelievable. So from the greatest of the greatest rabbis to the simplest of the simple person, this book has what you need. And we're going to jump around because the goal of this class is for you to understand the overview, the layout of the book, because if we don't go fast, we're not going to make through anything in this book. And the purpose is that each class I like to go through a chapter so that we can, and then you have to learn it on your own. So the idea is for you to understand the overview, the layout, things that I feel are crucial for you to understand, and then you'll do it on your own, because it's not something that you're going to learn and then move on. And like I said, the beauty of this book is because it's such a popular book, you can study from every rabbi has his like classes on this. You look online in Hebrew, English, any language, any commentaries. I have like 50 books of different commentaries of Messilat Yesharim. Not that I read them, but at least there's every day another rabbi, and so it's a wonderful, wonderful book to be always going deeper and in depth and learning about. So I want to start from the end, if you'll forgive me. Because like I said, I want you to understand the overview. Whoever heard this class, I apologize, but it's always good to hear again. Starting from the end of the book. Oh, okay. Because we have to remember, whenever we have the end of the introduction. This whole class is only the introduction. So we're starting from close to the end of the introduction, where the Ramchal tells us where is the source that he's bringing this book from. Okay? והוא מה שאמר משה רבנו עליו השלום באומרו ואתה ישראל מה השם עליך שואל ממך. Oh, it's too bad I don't have the same book you have, and then I could tell you where the source is. You see it? I see. So, basically, what is the source for this? What is the pasuk that this whole book is based on? And by the way, the first book, the book that comes before this book, is what's called Chovat HaLevavot, Duties of the Heart. It's like one of the greatest masterpieces. And it's the book, Duties of the Heart, Chovat HaLevavot, is based on this pasuk as well. There's 5 parts to this pasuk, and the book has 5 parts. The Ramchal, as you'll see, he took this pasuk and found a Gemara that expands on it, and we'll get there in a minute. But let's first get to the point. Moshe Rabbeinu, in Parshat Ekev, in the book of Dvarim, when we're Bamidbar, Ekev was in Dvarim. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he's going over going over Mishnah Torah, going over what we've went through, in the Parsha of Ekev, he says to us, he asks us a question. What's the question? Ma Hashem Elohecha shoel mimach. Simple question. Everybody stop. We're in the desert. We've ran around. Now I want to ask you a simple question. What Ma Hashem Elohecha shoel mimach? Because sometimes, because of all the trees, you don't see the forest. It's very important to stop sometimes and see the big picture. Moshe Rabbeinu stops us in the desert and says, stop. What does God want from you? Go for it. What does God want? I'm giving you a hint. Moshe Rabbeinu said God wants 5 things. If you were in this class, don't answer. What does God want? 5 things.
Like without cheating? To fear Him?
Oh, great.
Love Him.
The order is very important. So, 1 second. So, you got number 1 is you're right. That's the number 1 thing. To fear Him. And again, the Ramchal explains what kind of fear. We're talking about admiration, not fear of punishment. To be in awe, but not fear of punishment, because pachad, something else. That's what the book is trying to explain that. So that's number 1. You got it. You said number 3, which is love. What does that mean?
To like emulate, to walk in His ways.
That's over here. The order is very important. Right? Okay, we're missing 2.
We stay away from sin.
What's that? I got to remember.
So we can look at it. But it's
you can look. Read the pasuk. Ma Hashem Alecha Shem Yimach. And Moshe Rabbeinu says. And by the way, the way the Ramchal takes out the 5 things from this pasuk is also not simple. You read the pasuk. I don't know if you'd come up with the 5 things, but look at it. Ma Hashem Alecha Shem Yimach Kim Lira. We said. Lalechet bidrachav. So that's number 2. Sorry, this is here. Ve'alachta bidrachav. Oh, that's number 4. So it's lavot Hashem b'chol levavcha is kavana. Your kavana, your intention. That's harder. And then what's the last one? What's number 5? Come on, guys. Mitzvot. Okay, again, the order is very important because what are these 5 things? And then in the introduction, he goes through each one explaining what it is. Okay, and why is the order so important? So the reason is because if you look at a mountain, right? I'm surprised that you didn't say, usually the first thing you would think of is to do mitzvahs. So why is it down here?
Okay, it seems like everything's building up to it, but I don't know how walking...
Well, you could say, it says in the Gemara that first you have to makabel all machot shamayim and ve'az all mitzvot. Why is Shema before vayayim shamoah? Why do we first say Shema? The Gemara says in order to say first, you have to accept the yoke of heaven and then do the mitzvot. But I think here is very important to explain is that the mitzvot is the tip of the iceberg. There has to be a whole internal world. If you're doing mitzvot just as like, I'm paying my tax, right? Like someone says to his wife, right, I'm a good husband, I do the dishes, I make a living, I help with the kids, but I just want you to know I'm in love with the neighbor. You think the wife would be happy?
No.
So God is the same thing. Rahman Ali Babaya. God wants your heart. He wants everything to be there, not just the mitzvot is like you said, it's a building up, it's part, there's a relationship, there's a connection, there's also the actions. But everything here, these 4 things, are all about your internal world, which is called, in business, it's called the 80-20 rule.
is that 80% of your time is going to be spent on 20% of people.
80% of your business will come from 20% of your clients.
Yeah.
Or today, say it's 90-10, whatever. But let's say 80-20, okay? So what is yira? We said yira is admiration. It's you understand that God is all giving, all he wants to, he's taking care of the whole world. When you understand the greatness of God, you want to be partners in that. God is bringing the world to a good place. He's leading the world towards redemption all the time, and you want to be partners with God. So once you understand that, it brings you to Ve'alachta b'drachav. The Rambam says, where do we learn that we have to develop ourselves? Maybe just say, I accept myself the way I am. An animal is born. It's born the way it is. It starts walking, and it does that for the rest of its life. Why do I need to change? Why do I have to, become a better person? Why do I have to develop? If I'm an angry person, so I'm angry. That's the way it is. Accept me how I am. Or if I have, whatever it is, why do I have to change?
Because there's no tikkun olam without tikkun midot.
The Rambam says, where do we learn tikkun midot from? From the pasuk that says, "Ve'alachta b'drachav." To walk in God's ways means to become a better person, which means what does it mean to be a better person? It means to become balanced. And I recommend you all, if you can, to read the whole book of the Rambam. It's called the 8 chapters of the Rambam. It's the introduction of the Rambam to Pirkei Avot. And there, in the 4th chapter, he explains what does it mean to walk in God's ways. The 4th chapter of the 8 chapters of the Rambam, he talks about, it means going in the middle path, taking a middle path. Anger is, let's say, one extreme. He goes through 30 different characters. Anger being one extreme, and a lack of any feeling and emotion and caring is the other extreme, and patience is the middle. And he goes through 30 different things, and it's incredible. So that's walking. So in other words, when you admire God and you understand the greatness of God, it makes you want to become a better person, and that love is always an outcome of a process. You had this goal, you had this understanding of the greatness of God. It brought you to start developing yourself and becoming a better person. If I want to be able to be partners with God, I have to shape up a little bit. Shaping up created this love, this outpouring of love. Love is always an outcome of a process of work and effort, which is the opposite of what we're taught in the Western world, where you fall in love. It just happens out of nowhere, or happiness comes from something happened to you. No, love, we have a commandment to love, because when you learn things that make you understanding, knowing is loving, right? Knowing God is to love God. And then we move on to intention, which is kavanah. Kavanah, which is, again, your intention is it's all internal. All these 4 things are internal. And that will lead to doing the mitzvot. Now, this book, the Messilat Yesharim, only talks about these 4 things. Okay? It's a book that the mitzvot is another column in the library, which is halacha. If you had to compare this book to another book, the Messilat Yesharim, you would compare it to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is an obligation. Everyone has to learn it. It's basically 90% of the things you deal with in your life that you need to know. You don't need to go and ask a rabbi every question and exhaust him and waste his time because you're lazy, because I'm lazy, to read the simple halachas that every Jew has to know. So if you don't have it, buy a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and go through it. It's simple. It's not big. It's a small book. You can go through it very fast, and you should know the basic minimum halachas of every Jew day-to-day life. So that was a plug on halacha. That's not what we're learning here today. We're learning only these 4 subjects, okay?
Can you explain how Ava went to Kavanah?
Ava leads to kavanah. When you love somebody, then the actions you do for them come with an intention, and not just with, like we said, a person could... There's 2 people eating a korban. One is doing it because it's the will of God. The other one's doing it because he likes steak. So, but you don't know, you don't see. It's all internal, the internal world. That's why it says, Yesharim darchei Hashem, tzadikim yelchu bam, v'rasha'im yikashlu bam. The same action could be for one person an avera and for other person a mitzvah. But it's all internal. So that's already the world of kavanah. Okay? Can I erase this? If you want to take a picture, you can take a picture. I'm erasing it, moving on to...
It's just the kavanah only
Stage
comes
2.
out in terms of like a mitzvah, in terms of physical action. Like your kavanah and tefillah, that's the physical.
You could have kavanah to do something and you didn't even do it. It didn't come out physical. You had a kavanah to do something, and right, it says, "Harotze לעשות דבר ונאנס, מלא עליו הכתוב כאילו עשה." You wanted to do something, you weren't able to do it. It's as if you did it, because you were fully ready to do it and you were going to do it, but you got stopped for any reason. So that is the okay. Can I move on? So now, once the Ramchal explained to us where the pasuk come from, and he goes through each one. You guys will go through it on your own. Then we have to remember the relationship between the Torah and the Mishnah and the Gemara. I like to explain it like you have. I don't know if you ever saw Google Earth. When you see Google Earth, you look at the world, and then you zoom in and you see Israel, and then you zoom in and you see Jerusalem, and then you zoom in and you see the street that we are walking on. You see yourself waving at the camera. The Torah, the pasuk we just read, is what's called it's an essence. It's in Hebrew we say tamtzit. It's like it's the concentrate. Everything's in the Torah. He beat b'Torah v'bara alma. God looked into the Torah and created the world. So you look at the Torah, has everything in it, but it's a capsule of a nuclear plant, right? But then you go to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is already takes the pasuk and it's going into the city, into the country. Then you have the Gemara is going into the city. And then you have the halacha. In Hebrew, halacha means to walk. Atri halachot ela halichot, lalechet, to walk. Halach. So halacha tells you do this, don't do that. It's already very, very exact. Do, don't do. The same thing this book. The Torah is the pasuk we just brought of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Ramchal found the Gemara that explains this pasuk. If you want to know how to get to these 5 things,
Found the Mishnah.
yes, found the Mishnah and the Gemara, and this book is what's called the Halacha. He brings it down from the Torah to the Mishnah to the Gemara. So what is the pasuk that Rabbi, the Ramchal, found for us? The pasuk, the Mishnah or the Braita comes from. Can I erase this? You got it? Or it'd be nice if we could keep it. Leave it like this. Okay? So you have your 5 steps. The Ramchal found a Braita from Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair was one of the Tanaim, and there's a famous story about how he was walking to go and he was one of his main occupations was Pidyon Shvuim, to release the prisoners, which is considered in the Torah literature as considered the worst suffering a person can go through is a person that is in prison. It's the worst suffering, and therefore the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuim is one of the greatest mitzvahs of all. And the Jewish people always overdid it. The Gemara says you shouldn't overdo it, don't pay too much, but we pay way too much to get the prisoners out. How do you say, take an example of what happened with Gilad Shalit, exactly, and Gilad Shalit. And by the way, Jonathan Pollard, he refused to come out of prison if it was going to be with a prisoner's barters, which is unbelievable because his idealism. I got to be with him in prison, actually. I was a translator for Rav Eliyahu many years ago. Unbelievable. Anyway, Rav Pinchas ben Yair's his occupation.
Prisoner barters.
What they say is,
Prisoner
exchange.
exchange.
We will give us 1 prisoner, and
Take 1,000.
if it was 1 for 1, okay.
Yeah.
But they do it like 100 for 1,
Even more.
or 1,000 for
Well,
1.
actually, it was like 1,000.
It's horrible. And those people go and do terrorist attack. Anyway, well, let's not get all excited, off track. What happened is, the Rav Pinchas ben Yair, his occupation was to go and release prisoners. He was known for, which comes to tell us, he's there for us to release us from our prison of selfishness. That's what it means to become Messilat Yesharim, to work on our character, develop, means to come out of your prison of selfishness. And he would, this is the whole Messilat Yesharim is based on the Braita of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. And there's a story where he once went to release prisoners, and he came with this raging river. And he says to the river, I need you to split so I can go and do the mitzvah Pidyon Shvuim. The river says to him, no way. You may go to do the mitzvah and not succeed. There's no guarantee that you'll go and be successful in your mission of releasing the prisoners. But I am 100% guaranteed that I'm doing the will of God by flowing here. So if there's a guarantee and there's a question, which one should we listen to? So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair says to the river, I don't have time for a discussion. You either split, or I make a decree there will never be water flowing through you. And the sea split, and he walked through. This is like Kriyat Yamsuf that he did himself. And there's many, many other stories of the greatness of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair.
Love leads to Kavanah, or does Kavanah lead to love?
Love leads to Kavanah. So love leads to Kavanah. So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair said like this: if you want to get to these 5 steps, you need to take 9 steps. And like we said, when you look at the 5 steps, it's all or nothing. These are the 5 steps. You need to have Yira, walk in Shem's ways, love him, Kavanah, and mitzvah.
Nice background music. I'm sorry, but it's a community.
Beautiful.
That's nice.
We love it.
Stop dancing. Oh, he's not dancing.
So the Ramchal said, he brought that if you want to get to these 5 steps, you have to take 9 steps. Okay? There's 9 steps you have to take, and we'll see that it's not, when it comes to like, it's not all or nothing.
Is this Pinchas?
Pinchas ben Yair. I'll show you inside. Okay, so here's 9 steps. 9 steps. Now look where it is in here in the book. Go towards the end of the introduction. Mikan Amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. Ben Yair, again, to enlighten our... Whoa. Maybe we could close the windows a little bit. Okay. So, Rabbi Shimon. So anyway, the Ramchal comes and says that if you want to reach these, thank you, that's perfect. We'll do our best.
Should I leave this one open too, or close it?
If you can, close it. ואמרתם כל אחי, רבי שמעון בר יחי. אמרתם כל אחי, רבי שמעון בר יחי. אמרתם כל אחי.
Can't beat it, join it, right?
Exactly, can't beat them, join them. So, good, great, thank you. Sorry to trouble you. So, the Ramchal says here, if you look at the end, Amar Mikan, Amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, Torah meviah lidei zehirut. So, step number 1, zehirut. Step number 2, zirizut. Step number 3, nekiyut. Step number 4, prishut. Okay, we're not going to go through everything. There's 9 steps. What the Ramchal teaches us is that the 9 steps are split to 3 groups. Each group has Zerut is Yira, Ahava, and Kavanah. So basically it's the same thing. It goes through each one. It's like a loop. It's like a circle that's going up. So you reach the same spot. It's the same thing. The 3 groups are the same thing, but just on higher levels, more more refined. Okay. Now, what the beauty is that See, when we read these 5 things, it's all or nothing. But here, it's a different story. In the Braita, it's already, if you do these 3, you become a tzaddik. If you do these 3, you become a chassid. If you do these 3, you become a kadosh, and ultimately you get Ruach HaKodesh. So a tzaddik is what's the obligation of every Jew is to be a tzaddik. If you go to Shemayim, they say, why weren't you a tzaddik? And by the way, when I was 3 years old, I went to meet a tzaddik, the Amshnav Rabbi, and he said to me, what do you want to be when you're big? And I said, I want to be a tzaddik. And he said, it's hard work. Today I'm 45 years old, I still have the same goal. I want to be a tzaddik. I want to have zeirut, zrizut, nekiyut.
Tzaddik is defined as somebody, a Jew, who keeps as many of the 613 mitzvot as possible, right?
A tzaddik is someone who does the obligations his obligations. In other words, his obligations towards God, he does in a full way. Like we said, with kavanah, with ahava, he does everything but he also has God, and he has his relationship with God, and he has his own world. Right? He does what he's obligated, everything in a good way. He's a good Jew, but he also has his own world. Everything is within halacha. A chassid is somebody who goes above the letter of the law. But the halacha only says you have to do 1, 2, 3. Yeah, but I want to do more. Why? It's called ifni mishurat hadin. Above what's expected. And then a kadosh is someone that has no other reality but God. In our yeshivot, they basically only study these first 3 steps.
The basics.
The rabbis, all the rabbis, they taught these 3 steps. These other things you can study, and it's very important to go through the whole book because you need to know the people that you're connected to, what they went through, what did they do, what do they do, what does it mean to be a Ruach HaKodesh? What does it mean? Well, I'm connected to somebody like that. Who is he? What is he all about? So it's very important to learn everything, but to really go over and over and over and over are these first 3 steps. Okay?
Is the book built this way?
What do you mean?
Is the book built in that way?
Yeah. This is the layout of the book.
There are 9 chapters.
Yes.
3 chapters is Zut.
3. Each chapter has the 3 parts, and we'll go through it in 1 minute. Now we're going to talk about the layout of the book. Okay? The layout of the book is that every character has 4 parts. Again, the Ramchal is the master of systematic and organized. Everything is very, very systematic, very organized. It's not, he has like a method. You need to know 1, 2, 3 in order to go to 3, 4, 5. Right? Everything is very methodical and organized. He's the master educator of all times. Okay? So each chapter has 4 parts. What are the parts? Klal, Prat, Kniya, and Hefsed. And this is very important to know. That these are rules for learning Torah and everything. So it's very important to understand. And he goes through it. This is the layout for the whole book. First of all, you have to understand the overview. When we start learning Zehirut, you're going to see the first chapter is what is the overview. You have to understand the big picture. And it's very important to also take this into your life or into your Torah learning. When you start learning Torah, do not jump into a Gemara right into Rava says this. Whoa. Understand the overview. Understand the big picture. Understand the concepts. Understand the goals. Right? Don't just jump into the details because then you'll get lost. So first understand the klal, the overview. Chapter number 2, understand what you have to do, the prat, the detail. Okay, it's not enough to just know the big picture. What do I have to do? Here's what you have to do. Right now you understand the overview. Now go do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, great. I understand. I know the overview. I know what to do. What else do I need? I know what to do. Why do I need something else? You need motivation. Just because you know something doesn't mean you're going to do it. It's one thing that things are here in your head. To penetrate to your life, you need motivation. to get yourself off the couch, it's not enough to know. There's people that could say by heart. So tell me, what do I have to do? You have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why aren't you doing it? I don't have motivation. When it comes to motivation, the Ramchal has he breaks that down to 3 types of motivation. There are 3, which is very important to know. Not everybody is motivated the same way. What motivates you discourages this other person. What motivates another person could, you know what I'm saying? So everybody has a different chanoch l'nar al pi darko. Educate the child based on who he is and what motivates him. So he basically breaks down to 3, prototypes of people those are the 3 types of motivations. He calls it Shlemei Hadat, Pchutim, and Hamon Ha'am. Okay, we're not going to go into that, but that's in chapter. That's the 3rd part of the understanding one character. And then the last part, and again, this is the layout for the whole book, so it's important that you understand this. The last part is, what else do I need? I understand the overview. I know what I have to do. I have motivation and I'm doing it. What else do I need? What could be left? Answer: maintenance and upkeep. Just because you know something, you know what to do, and you're motivated, and you're doing it, doesn't mean you will continue. We live in a world where there's wear and tear. Everything gets worn down. I mean, this is such a secret. People think, okay, I get married, we love each other, and then it's only downhill from there because there's wear and tear. The answer is, it's only if you don't do what's called maintenance and upkeep. If you do maintenance and upkeep, you could love the person even more than the time you met them because it's deeper, and the love could get stronger and stronger. There's very important maintenance in the relationship. You talk every day, you share thoughts, you make sure there's time together. And this is what, again, it's not like, okay, that's it. It's downhill from here. Like I always tell people, I get married. I'm married, thank God, 25 years. Never been more in love with my wife. I can't say we didn't spend a small fortune on marriage therapy. We come from different worlds, different, just men and women are very different. What?
You did or you didn't?
I did. I invested in marriage therapy since I also didn't grow up with a home where it was a very healthy, my parents are divorced, so I had no model of how it's supposed to work, and I had to relearn it myself through a lot of hard work and effort. But there's nothing greater. But the Ramchal is telling us, don't think that you come to yeshiva and you're so excited and passionate, and then you go into life, you go work, and you become another guy that's just a boring, no passion, no excitement for godliness. That's not true. That's only true if you don't buy yourself for 50 shekels the Messilat Yesharim and learn it every day. If you get the Messilat Yesharim and you learn it, it's like we have what's called forgetting. Forgetting is a wonderful gift. We forget all the bad things that happen to us, but it's like a medication. You have to take, if you take a medication and it has a side effect, you have to then take action to deal with the side effect. So medication of forgetting is you're supposed to forget the bad things. That's why you're supposed to wake up every morning and say, the whole davening, the whole siddur is there to remind you the things you need to remember, because you will forget. It's the way it works. And we have to forget the things we need to forget and remember the things we have to remember. That's what the Ramchal writes at the beginning. I'm not coming to teach you something new, but these are things that you need to remember, you need to learn. So this is a very big secret. And I'll just, just to keep you in understanding the overview, we have to end in a few minutes, I think. Just to give you a big picture of the... Okay, no, I want to lead us into the next class. So most books, now that we learned your introduction, what are we ready for? We're ready for, let's learn to be a tzaddik, right? So you expect that the next chapter would be Zeirut, Klal. No. The Ramchal starts with a chapter. The first chapter is Klal Chovat Adam Be'olamo. The whole first chapter which we're going to start learning next week, hopefully, is about understanding Olam Haba. The Ramchal says, if you don't understand what Olam Haba is, then we can't take any steps. We can't go anywhere. First, you need to understand. In other words, I come to you and I say, where are we? Where are you? Thomas, wait, no. Thomas, no. What's your name? I forgot.
This guy? Hirsch.
Hirsch, you're not on the list. I'm like, wait. Hirsch, forgive me. Tzvi Hirsch, no? I like Hirsch. Hirsch
You
is
can call me
Tzvi.
either, but Hirsch, yeah.
Hirsch.
I go by either.
So, my grandfather was Tzvi Hirsch, that's why. So, Hirsch, if I ask you, do you want to lift up this world? Do you want to fix this world? I want to lift up this world. I want to fix this world. Ramchal says, stop, relax a little bit. In Hebrew, you say, Shakua ba'olam hazeh. If you are sunk into this materialism of this world, into the materialism, the chomer,
Materialism like vain.
materialism,
gold.
everything.
Doesn't necessarily have to be vanity.
It doesn't have to be vanity. Anything materialism of this world, whether it's
Materialism has two definitions, so which one?
No.
both physical
You're saying
and
there's anything
spiritual
else that's like,
materialism.
No, like.
If you are
materialist analysis
sunk,
of reality.
if you're sunk into this world, you can't lift up this world because you're stuck in the world. So the Ramchal says, first you have to lift yourself above this world. We used to say, "Liot yoter olam habayim." You have to be more next world oriented. But what does it really mean? What is the first chapter all about? And this is I'm giving the plug for next week.
I thought Judaism focused on the Olam Hazeh, fixing it.
Exactly. We'll talk about why Olam Haba was not. Once we start talking about Olam Haba next class, we'll go deep into what is Olam, where did it come from, and what it's all about. We'll have a great time talking about Olam Haba. It's not what we want to talk about now, but basically what I'm saying is the first chapter is, you want to lift up this world? First, lift yourself up. Get yourself out of the mud. Get yourself out of the being stuck in this world. And then you'll be able to lift up this world. Because you have to first detach yourself a little bit. That's the next week. But what is the Ramchal teaching us? Why is it that if you don't understand that there's Olam Hazeh and there's Olam Haba, you can't even start the process of becoming a tzaddik, of getting out of your prison? Why? Because unless you understand that there's a body and there's a soul, there's a higher level and a lower level, unless you understand that there is something, unless you understand this, what I'm telling you now, there is something that you cannot grasp with your physical senses, but it's more valuable and more real and more eternal than anything else you can grasp, there's nowhere to go. So that's the first step is. First step is understanding Olam Haba, or Neshama. What is the Neshama? What is Olam Haba? And Ramchal brings 5 different angles to explain it, in 5 different ways, to 5 different type of people, and 5 different ways of explaining, so that at least everyone should have one angle that should hit home. You should understand there is Olam Haba, there is a soul, there is something that, like I said, we cannot grasp with our physical senses, but it's more real, more valuable, more eternal than anything you can grasp, and then you can begin to move forward. Yes?
So the Ramchal said that if one does not understand what Olam Haba is, they cannot what?
They cannot start to lift up this world, lift up themselves, to grow. All of growth, spiritual growth, which is what we're trying to do in this book, and develop ourselves in
They
our
cannot
character.
grow, nor can they
Nothing.
not lift themselves up, nor the world.
Exactly. In other words, there's sometimes you have to have a understanding where your perceptive suddenly changes. I'll give you an example. Something happened to me, and this could happen also when understanding Olam Haba. I was living in Israel in a time when there was a lot of suicide bombers, and they were literally I was living in Nachlaot, and there was restaurants. The Subaru restaurant blew up, and there was bus bombings, and there was right next to my house one night, one day in the morning, my house, the roof of my house blew off. The roof of my house. I thought that we had a huge eucalyptus tree. We lived on right next to Machon Meir. There's a street called Sherizli, and there was right there is I wonder what's the street called behind it. I think it's Messilat Yesharim. I think there's a. I have to check that out. There's a street, parallel street.
There is. I don't know if it's
The roof So basically, there was a woman there. She was moving to Nachlaot from Ma'ale Michmas. Her name was Ayelet Shachar Levi. She was the daughter of the minister of what do you say, of cars, of Tachbura, of
Urban transportation.
transportation. And she was just coming there, and she was unloading her car, her truck, and the parking spot where I parked my car that night, it was caught. I had to park somewhere else. It was a terrorist that put a bomb in the car, in my spot, and the whole car blew up, and she was in pieces. And I was completely shooken up. And that Saturday night, I went to, and the whole country was shooken up because of this. It was the beginning of terrorism and Intifada, and I was shooken up. And I was playing music then. I'm a musician, I was a drummer, and I was playing at a convention it was called My Yeshua. They were trying to strengthen people.
You religious then?
I was, yes, but like getting into it. And then I heard this rabbi, Rav Shlomo Aviner, speak. And he started talking about, he said, you have to look at everything in a perspective and a proportion. Right? What does hashkafa mean? You have to put on the glasses and put on mishkafa and see everything differently. This revelation of Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba is humongous. But it, like, in other words, we're going to talk about next week. I don't want to start getting into it too much, but I'm saying for me, another revelation that I had was, he started talking about, like, terrorism is psychological warfare. It's like the amount of people, it's kill one person in the Kasbah and scare 1 million people. And the media, unintentionally, are basically, it's, how do you say, in Hebrew you say gol atzmi. It's when you when the soccer player, like, they put in the ball to their own. What's that? Own goal.
Yeah.
So we are feeding into that. And suddenly, and he's explaining, Israel has the lowest amount of murders, including terrorism, than any other country in the world. And in Israel, every meter is a border, and every civilian is a soldier. And the war has begun, and it didn't finish. We're continuing the war of independence, and there are casualties, but it's so, like, people die from car accidents, from smoking, from eating unhealthy, like thousands and thousands a year, and this is nothing. And you don't even need to pay attention to it. In countries where there's censorism and you cannot advertise terrorism, there isn't terrorism, because terrorism is not advertised, is not terrorism. Okay, sorry, we're supposed to finish. Thank you. Ad kan.
Uh-oh.
See you guys next week.